Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to stand up today to speak on Bill C-12. Mr. Speaker, I hope you and all colleagues in this chamber had an amazing Thanksgiving. I know I enjoyed the week in my riding, but I'm certainly back here in Ottawa to continue the important work we do here on behalf of Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Mr. Speaker, we're debating this bill today because this is a Liberals' actual second attempt in this same Parliament. Their first attempt would have allowed for a massive sweeping violation of every law-abiding Canadian's individual freedom and privacy. In fact, that bill, which has not been withdrawn, we found out from a Liberal member this morning, it's still on the order paper, allows for Canada Post to open any mail, including letters without a warrant. It would ban cash payments and donations over $10,000. It would allow for warrantless access to personal information. It could compel electronic service providers to re-engineer their platforms to help CSIS and the police access information. And it would allow the government to supply financial institutions with Canadians' personal information apparently in an attempt to try to resolve laundering and terrorist financing purposes. Mr. Speaker, these are Canadians' hard-earned rights that this Liberal government seems to not want to respect. The Liberals tried to pass a power grab to access Canadians' personal information from service providers like banks and telecom companies without even needing a warrant. Worse, they didn't consult the Privacy Commissioner. It was only due to Conservative pressure, Mr. Speaker, that the Liberals backed down, it appears, with the introduction of this new Bill C-12. Conservatives will always stand up for Canadians' individual freedom and privacy. It's a fundamental tenet of a democratic nation, Mr. Speaker. This new bill continues with the same old Liberal soft-on-crime policies that are causing crime and chaos in our communities. Liberal bail is still very much alive and well for those who traffic guns over our border and terrorize our communities. There are still no mandatory prison times for fentanyl traffickers. Astonishingly, there are still no mandatory prison times for gangsters who use guns to commit crimes. In the last month alone in my riding, in fact, in one of the municipalities of my riding in Richmond Hill, we saw two brutal executions in broad daylight on quiet residential streets, Mr. Speaker. One of them with a firearm. The Liberals have let thousands of guns flood across our border where they're used to commit crimes in our communities. Now, I think that members on the opposite side, members of this Liberal government, need to rethink about the way they are trying to fool Canadians, Mr. Speaker. Everything is not a political issue. Decisions we make in this House affect real people. Making announcements like they did on December 5th, 2024, as they do every year, the day before the anniversary of the Polytechnic massacre, that they're banning firearms to try to capitalize on that anniversary for some political gain, does not resolve the problem, I say to my fellow colleagues across the aisle here. These illegal guns are coming across the border. They're not law-abiding Canadian citizens, hunters, sport shooters who perpetrate these crimes. They're not people with a license, with a firearm that is licensed to them that commit these crimes. These are people that commit these crimes. People that commit these crimes are people that purchase these guns from the back of a car, back of a Honda, at the mall or in some aisle somewhere for $600, $700. They're not serious about resolving the issue. And here we are now in Richmond Hill in the last 30 days with two murders in broad daylight, one with one of those illegal guns that came across the border that none of the Liberal announcements in the early part of December of every year have been able to resolve and will continue to not resolve. Instead of taking real action and implementing real consequences for those smuggling guns at our borders, Liberals want to waste millions of dollars buying back guns from highly vetted legal firearm owners. This will do nothing and has done nothing Mr. Speaker, to reduce crime in our communities. Criminals are actually laughing at the Canadian government, this Canadian government. They get arrested by our hardworking law enforcement officers, and under this bill, would still be let out on bail. Sometimes hours later, we are told by police forces across the country, where they then go out and re-brutalize communities once again over and over and over. When they are convicted, liberal hug-a-thug policies allow many of these criminals to serve their sentences from the comfort of their own homes. Wow, what a big penalty. Mr. Speaker, we need jail, not liberal bail for violent offenders, and only conservatives will bring back safe streets into our communities. Mr. Speaker, this bill also touches upon immigration, and more specifically, our asylum system. Let me be clear. Over the last 10 years, the Liberal government has systematically dismantled our immigration system and certainly obliterated our asylum system. Back in the Prime Minister Harper days, when I had the honor of serving as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration, our asylum system was well respected around the world and operated with swiftness, integrity, and fairness. In 2014, there were less than 10,000 asylum claims pending. Today, there are hundreds of thousands due to these Liberals' failed policies, Mr. Speaker. Why, for years, has this government put asylum seekers, many of whom make false claims, in hotels at the taxpayers' expense? Canadians from right across our country would love to hear the answer to that question. Why, for years, has this Liberal government given a more generous health care plan to asylum seekers than Canadians receive? Numerous constituents in my riding would love the level of coverage given to asylum seekers. How is this fair to the Canadian taxpayer and to Canadian people? This is billions of dollars allocated away from other services and infrastructure. It is unacceptable, Mr. Speaker, that the Liberals facilitated by their inaction and their rhetoric the flow of asylum seekers coming to Canada through other G7 countries. I would argue, as many people would, that the United States, the United Kingdom, and Germany are safe, peaceful, and democratic countries with functioning asylum seekers. When individuals enter Canada through a G7 country, it makes a mockery of our system, Mr. Speaker, and it undermines our commitment to processing genuine refugees efficiently. And these are people that need help. Canada's once well-perceived, respected, and functional immigration system has been ruined by 10 years of abysmal Liberal policy. Millions upon millions of immigrants arrive through all channels without the proper health care, housing, or jobs to support them. Liberals bringing in millions of new immigrants with not enough jobs available means youth unemployment at a staggering highs. Liberals bringing in millions of new immigrants without the necessary healthcare capacity means costs go up and wait times get longer. Liberals bringing in millions of new immigrants without the proper housing drives up housing costs, making housing unaffordable. Mr. Speaker, both Canadians and immigrants suffer due to these policies. We cannot blame immigrants for Liberals' failures. Functionally, our system has lost most, if not all, integrity. There is very little enforcement of departures, very little tracking of individuals in the system, and the asylum claim backlog is mountainous. Furthermore, the reports of individuals with serious criminal convictions being let out into the country under this government's watch represent a threat to public safety and raises questions about the thoroughness of all background checks being completed. In closing, Mr. Speaker, the 7th immigration minister in 10 years has offered no solutions. This bill will continue clogging up our immigration system and push the problems down the road. Luckily, Conservatives will end this chaos, fix our once proud immigration system, add more CBSA officers, and reform the temporary foreign worker program, and build an immigration system that Canadians can be proud of once again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Pontiac-Kitikani-Zibi.
refer to law enforcement officers. And I would remind him that just steps away from this very chamber is a memorial that honor RCMP officers that gave their life to protect Canadians. I would like to ask my colleague, what does he think of the shameful comments made by his leader about the very officers that have given their life for this country? What does he think of those comments?
Honourable member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, the Liberals are going to try to deflect from the debate in the House. We're talking about Bill C2, C12, which is a rendition, a change-up of Bill C2. We're talking about people being murdered in the streets. My colleague may have not heard what I said, but let me tell you, there were 2 murders in my community in the last 30 days. And it is shameful that this government wants to politicize an issue that they should be focusing on, keeping these criminals off the streets, keeping illegal guns off of our streets, keeping them in jail where they belong. Enough of this Liberal cover-up of and continuing to support their bail instead of jail. People that commit crimes in this country are expected to spend time in prison by every single Canadian across this country.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable member for Cambridge.
Mr. Speaker, after Conservatives forced the Liberals to back down from Bill C2 for overstepping Canadians' freedoms and privacy, they've now returned with Bill C12. Would my colleague not agree that Parliament must carefully scrutinise this revised legislation to ensure nothing has been added that could once again put the privacy rights of law-abiding Canadians at risk?
The Honourable member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for the very thoughtful and thorough question. I agree 100%. I think legislation needs to be debated in this House. I think amendments that should be taken seriously. This Liberal government has a record of ignoring amendments, ignoring good ideas when they come from other elected members in this House that happen to not be from their party. Mr. Speaker, this is what this House is all about. This is the House of democracy. The voice of every Canadian is represented here in one of the members, by one of the members that have the opportunity to sit in these chairs. So absolutely, legislation needs to be discussed here, debated here, and made better for Canada and Canadians.
Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Pierre-Boucher.
The Honourable Member for Pierre-Boucher, les Patriotes Verchères. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have the same question for my colleague as I previously asked, because I didn't get an answer to my previous question. But it was a simple question. This bill is partly about border restrictions having to do with certain asylum claims abuses, people making claims that perhaps they shouldn't. So the goal here is to reduce the volume in order to better process claims, except the issue is that in Quebec, we've received 200,000 asylum claimants, which is 40% of the Canadian total, even though we only represent 20% of the Canadian population. So I'd like to hear from my colleague. Does he believe that the Canadian provinces should do their fair share and receive an amount of asylum claimants that matches their proportion of the population? The Honourable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for that very thoughtful and thorough question. Look, Mr. Speaker, I was born and raised in Quebec. I'm proud to say that I was born in the great city of Montreal, and I can tell my honourable member in response to this question is simply this. The 200,000 asylum seekers, the tens and tens and tens of thousands that have grown under this Liberal government have created this problem in Quebec. It's not fair for Quebec. I agree with my colleague. It's not fair for any province in Canada that we have to deal with this monstrous problem that has been created by this incompetent Liberal government that continues. Now we are 10 years later and they're magically trying to bring in legislation as if they now finally found a solution. Had they listened to us 10 years ago, we would not have the problem we're facing today in Quebec, in Ontario, or in any province across this country.